if you're overthinking, anxious, and feel like you're stuck in your own head a lot, I want you to stop scrolling and come for a little walk. I'm going to explain to you now, and I'm going to give you the science behind how a 10-minute walk can change your brain chemistry, reduce stress, and to naturally boost your motivation. So I am out at the moment for a little walk, and I have my weighted vest on because what I'm actually doing here is a little bit of rucking, something I'm kind of enjoying at the minute. But anyway, let's get back to the video. So how does walking change your brain state? So the first thing is blood flow. So walking, doing exercise, improves blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible, it's also known as the executive function. So it's responsible for things like focus, decision making, problem solving. And then when we think about being in a state of stress, it's generally because there's problems that we're dealing with that we can't either figure out the answer to, or become so engrossed in what we're doing, we start overthinking things. But when we improve that blood flow, we improve the functioning of that part of the brain. So what we're essentially doing is we're improving or boosting cognitive performance. So the second thing is nature. I'm kind of thinking now I wish I brought a stick with this because my arm's starting to hurt a little bit. Anyway, it's about being in nature. So when we connect ourselves to nature, especially when we get sort of around like green stuff and like proper nature, like where there's no cars and things, then we connect ourselves to nature. And what this actually does is this does a couple of things. So the first thing, it starts to help us to not overthink. So because we're connected to nature, we stop ruminating. Now, there was a great study in 2015 that showed that people who went and did a walk outside in urban areas compared to the people who went outside and did walks out in nature, what they found was that the people who went out into nature, they stopped ruminating, whereas the people who went out into the cities or wherever that it was, the urban areas, that they didn't reduce this noise in their head. And the second thing is nature naturally reduces cortisol levels. So if you think about it, if we're sat in and we're struggling with a problem or we're struggling with whatever that it is, and we're sitting and we're ruminating, cortisol levels spike, which impedes our ability to focus when it's too high for too long. So if we come out inside of nature, we can naturally lower those cortisol levels. And because we naturally lower those cortisol levels, we can then start thinking a lot more clearly. And the third thing is where it gets really sexy, okay? And this is about dopamine, okay? So when we do exercise that we enjoy, particularly walking, I think most people we can agree on, most people love to walk. It has that calming effect and most people enjoy it. But when we do exercise we enjoy, what happens is we actually boost dopamine. So dopamine, in case you didn't know what dopamine does or its roles and responsibilities, a lot of people think dopamine is about pleasure, but actually it's about pursuit and motivation. So you can think of dopamine as the motivation hormone, okay? So when we naturally boost dopamine through things like walking out in nature and doing exercise we enjoy, we get those natural levels of dopamine elevated. And we got those natural levels of dopamine elevated, we can then use that to pursue that hard task or hard problem that we're maybe not motivated to actually do. But here's the thing with dopamine, most people actually waste their dopamine on a daily basis. You can actually burn your dopamine receptors out. Okay, and this is very, very common. So when people are spending a lot of time sort of scrolling through social media is probably the typical modern way to burn out dopamine receptors, because here's what happens. When you go on to look at a post, you get initial spike of dopamine, okay? Then that dopamine starts to kind of come down. So then you need a bigger stimulation to get a bigger spike of dopamine. And this is how you continue, you go down rabbit holes on social media because the algorithm knows exactly how to get your attention. And when it's got your attention, it spikes your dopamine. And this is why you get sort of, half an hour in, and then all of a sudden you're starting to feel depressed, okay? So this is very common. So a lot of people, they get burned out from that overuse of dopamine. So really what we want to be doing is we want to be elevating dopamine naturally, and this is why coming out in nature and going for walks is a great way to do that. Cold water exposure, by the way, is actually also another way that you can do that, but we'll keep that for another video. But what you can do is, and this is when I find it gets exciting, when you elevate those levels of dopamine, you can then attack that problem that you're dealing with that newfound motivation, okay? So if you think about it this way, from the whole 3-step process that I've just given you there, so we're going out into nature where we are boosting blood flow to the brain, which is going to help us think clearly. It's going to help us to focus, to get attention, to start solving that problem. It's going to clear our mind, okay? The second thing is, it's going to reduce those cortisol levels, and because it reduces those cortisol levels, that puts us in a better state for focus and attention, and it stops us from getting kind of burnt out from what we're doing. And that final thing is, that's motivation. We're getting that boost of dopamine, which is then going to give us that motivation we need to then attack that problem that we are dealing with. So here's the thing with walking. Walking is probably the most underrated performance tool at your disposal, and it's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you a penny. All you've got to do is open your door and go for a walk outside. If that was helpful, please let me know. Let me know in the comments, or subscribe to this channel, because when you do that, that gives me an indication that, well, the stuff that I'm putting out there is actually valuable to people, and it helps me a lot. So if you could do that, that would be absolutely great. And if you've got any questions on this or anything about sort of health and performance, like, drop it in the comments and I'll do my best to help you out.